Hello, we're live.
Hello.
How are you guys? How you doing? How you guys doing?
Not too bad.
Yeah,
Not too bad.
Not bad at all. Yeah, it's
Great.
sunny today.
Great. We're entering hour 7 of the Intergames Career Fair now. So we're on the home stretch. So thanks very much. If you joined us throughout the whole day from the start to the finish, please mention something in the stream comments. You won't win anything, but you will have the Intergames team's eternal respect, and we might even make a special little color for you in the Discord channel if you've been there that long. So we've got a few there. Phil Harland, yes, still going. Smee, Chris R. Rigodon, yes. You got it. Looks like loads of you. Amazing. I hope, yes, you've been nailing it. Thank you so much for joining us and staying with us the whole time. My name's Declan. I head up Into Games, and I've been watching all of the panels discussions today with amazing interest. Everyone, it's just been such a fantastic day of talks, and we've loved every moment of it. So, just big respect to all the speakers that have come so far. But this is the last panel of the day, which is a bit sad, but it's also super happy because we've got two brilliant humans that we're going to be speaking to now about setting up an indie studio, which I'm sure probably most people that are watching this today or joined the Intergames Careers Fair have wondered about doing. Probably would like to do one day, even if it isn't the greatest idea. We might get to the end of this conversation and it might not be the best of ideas, or it could be a great idea. It depends how you approach it. We've got two different studios today, actually, between the two of you. I think you are both indie studios, but maybe approach it slightly differently. I think that's going to be really interesting to explore both of those as we go forward. So if you can both just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your studio just to kick off, that'd be great. So Jay, if you want to start off.
Yeah, I can totally. So, hi, I'm Jay. I'm one of the co-founder directors of Arrogant Pixel. We're a small indie studio based in London. We're probably best well known for a point-and-click adventure game series called The Tale of Doris and the Dragon. Sort of pixel art point-and-click adventure. It's quite cute. Please do check it out. But my day job as well, what I do is I do biz dev for the company, but I also do biz dev at Curve Digital. So I actually work for a publishing company as well. And I also teach at the University of West London. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Adam?
Hi, everyone. My name is Adam. I run a studio called BetaJester, which is based up in Yorkshire, sort of across York and Hull. We've now been going for just over 6 years. We do a combination of working on our own games, so looking for publishers, finding finance, all that kind of thing, and doing work for hire. So we work with other game studios. We work with people out in different sectors outside of games, developing virtual reality solutions or augmented reality games, web games, marketing, and all that kind of thing using sort of games technology.
Fantastic. And I suppose the first question really is, why did you decide to go alone initially? What was it that kind of pushed you in that direction? And when you started that process, I guess, what were your hopes for when you launched that studio and where it wanted to go?
I'll go first, Adam, if that's okay. I'd probably call myself a bit of a serial entrepreneur, if that makes sense. So I've been starting businesses since I was a teenager, essentially. I initially actually started off in music. I wanted to be a rock star. And then when that didn't quite work out, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a music manager. I'm going to help people become rock stars. So it was all about learning how to freelance, how to set up your own business, how to deal with taxes, how to hire people. But I actually find all of that boring stuff really interesting. And I like seeing the numbers tick up, in my bank account. I like being in control of like my own career and my own career path, which is probably why I like to do lots of little projects of my own, essentially. But it's sort of in my blood, I think, like starting up a company. And that's the thing that I would probably sort of underline. It's like, you kind of need to really want to do that in order for this to be like a viable career. Otherwise, it's not fun, basically. What about you, Adam?
I mean, so from my perspective, so I was a student, and we had in sort of where we were going from, we'd seen two studios before us from our same university set up, and we were in a position where we always wanted to become an indie studio at some point. The original plan was, oh, we'll go into industry, we'll do that for sort of 5 years, or whatever it may be, and then come back with skills and knowledge. And then we were basically just given a really good opportunity, which was that for us, we were offered by our local university basically some office space for free for sort of 6 months, and the support of a few sort of local businesses and the studios that had graduated before us. And we kind of went, well, we'd like to do it in 5 years anyway, but if we've got this fantastic opportunity to do it now, before we have mortgages, before we have children or partners or whatever it may be that would otherwise depend on us having sort of stability, this is a good opportunity to sort of give it a go and just see if it works. And so we did. We kind of went into it just saying, well, can we make it work? What does it look like for it to work? And sort of figured it out on the job. And then 6 years have gone by. And that's really how I sort of ended up here, is just kind of figuring it out and seeing what works and just trying out the space. And just sort of finding different ways to make it work, which is one of the reasons why we do a lot of work for hire as well as being a game studio, because it's about how could we make something like this in this kind of space stable over a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, yeah, that entrepreneurial mindset that you're talking about, Jay, is like it's so key to this setting up an indie studio. It feels like lots of people have good ideas for games, but that's not the thing that's necessarily going to make you successful as an indie studio, I guess. It's going to be that other stuff as well that's kind of around it when it comes to running a business.
I absolutely agree. It's just like, you don't set up a studio to make the one game. That's probably the key. It's like, what is the future of the company, in like a year's time, 5 years time, 10 years time? Not saying that you have to have an exit strategy or anything like that. It's just more, you need to have a bigger vision as an entrepreneur. It's like, okay, you take on these employees. What's going to happen to those employees once you finish the project? Do you have a plan for them, or are you just going to scramble at the last minute? I think that key, is that you're basically becoming, I don't know, I kind of describe it as like forming your own country. Basically, you're like you're putting your own laws. You're sort of dictating the lives of these people that sort of come into your space, right? And then that means that you need to have a lot of responsibility over these people that come into your company. So you need to really have like that level of people management and want to do that as well. I think that a lot of people go into starting up a games company thinking, I'm going to make this game. But if you don't have a second or third or fourth idea, then that's, that could be a problem, essentially, like in the future.
Yeah, and like, I think, what Adam was saying as well about essentially like diversifying your revenue streams. So, you mentioned that, I think you do make your own titles, but also you make titles for other people, or you make game experiences for other people. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that kind of revenue stream that you've got there? Because I think that's something that maybe people who are about to start an indie studio might not think about as much.
No, absolutely. I mean, so basically we were in the position when we first started, was we recognized that obviously a lot of indie studios sort of start, they go, we've got this one game idea, it's going to be amazing, we're going to build that, and that's it. And particularly now when I talk to students or anyone who's sort of about to start their indie studio, they're like, oh, I've got this amazing game idea, it's going to make me rich. I'm like, okay, great, that's going to take you a year to build. How'd you get paid for that year? And they go, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. And that's sort of where we started, as we went, well, we know that we have these kind of, for us, because we sort of came from a programming background, we had the technical skills that we could apply to other areas. And we went, well, work for hire seems like a pretty logical way for us to, work with other studios or universities or museums or businesses, people who need that kind of skill set, for if you go to a museum and there's an app or there's some kind of digital showcase, whatever it may be, those all come from, technical people who've built stuff. And we knew that was a revenue stream for us, whereby people could pay us to do that kind of work. And then we could use that money to both pay all of ourselves, our employees, but also then use that to stabilize building our own games in the background or looking for funding or whatever it may be. And so for us, that was our kind of our way of sort of fixing that problem. So some studios, we know they kind of just go all guns blazing from the beginning. They go out there looking for a publisher or looking for, or take a loan or whatever it may be. And that definitely works for some people, especially if they're like, the only thing I want to do is just make our games, and that's it. I don't want to do anything else, and that's fine. But it's the less stable path, because obviously games don't make money until they're released and you've got money coming in. So for us, we wanted to go down the route of stability over kind of going for a game that didn't work out, which maybe that's the reason that we're still here 6 years later. And you know, I've had really good friends who are really intelligent and capable who their studios have shut down because they didn't get any funding or because the game wasn't as successful as they wanted it to be. But equally, I've had friends who have been super successful down that route. It's sort of, you have to kind of find the path that works for you and your team that you're all comfortable with going down. Some people like it, the chaos of it. Some people prefer stability.
And, you know, how do you get those kind of clients? I mean, how do you go about getting that extra work that isn't the kind of, you know, the game that you're making? What's kind of main routes to that?
I wish there was just one answer. I could be like, well, we just, you know, we go into the client pool and there's the clients of all of them with massive budgets. I wish that was the case. For us, it's a case of it's a large amount of networking. There are people out there with budgets who need to build one thing or another. Those budgets can change. The projects are different, the people are different, and they are all just looking for people who could deliver. And there are a lot of work for hire studios out there who can deliver high quality piece of work. You just kind of have to be the name on the people's lips. When they turn someone and say, oh, can you recommend me a studio who can do X? It needs to be you who's recommended. And that really just involves networking, marketing, advertising, being out there, talking to people. Sometimes we find it we'll talk directly to someone, they'll go, oh, well, we're doing this and we could do it with you. But actually, more often than not, it involves somebody 3 people away from us who's heard our name as a good studio, that when somebody comes to them and says, oh, I'm really looking for a studio who does VR work because I'm just about to start this project to do with this building site in Guildford. If that person goes, oh, well, have you heard of BetaJester? Then we know we're in a good place. It really is. It's just getting your name out there to all the people and all the places.
Yeah, no, do you know what? I actually really do share your views on like longevity and stability, to be honest, because my fear is letting my team down and also having to look for a real job. That's like literally what my fear is, essentially, so that I just need money so that I can still do my antics and just get up to all the mischief that I get up to, whilst also providing some stability for my team. And we've done work for hire as well. So it's not just, I think that is, a lot of people think that it's like the less glamorous part of it, and it is essentially, it's the nitty gritty. But if you don't think of your day to day, your Monday to Friday, you know, how are people paying their rent, then you become a really bad studio to work for as well, especially before you've even started launching your first products. And I found that when you are pitching to publishers, we're going through that process at the moment, they respect you a lot more if you have published games on your own as well. They're like, this is a studio that can get stuff done, even with a tiny amount of money. So I think that's really, really important. The key is just sort of like long-term success, not short-term rewards. Like that's not what starting up an indie studio will get you, because games take a long time to make.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, all those other projects you're doing for other organizations, you're still learning as a studio, I guess, you know, and there's things that you might be implementing in other little projects elsewhere that you go, you know, that's something I can apply to, you know, the main project, that, you know, the reason why I got into this as well. So, I mean, you mentioned, Jay, there pitching to publishers. Obviously, that's a big part of, you know, well, it doesn't really matter if you're AAA really or an indie studio. You know, I mean, you're doing a lot of pitching a lot of the time. What's that process look like? You know, from kind of start to finish for someone that's never done that before. What does that look like?
Well, like I said, we're going through that process at the moment, and it's just very long is what I would say. It's just like whatever time you think it's going to take, like double or triple it, essentially, especially with Corona as well. Like, I think that if in-person events were, you know, the norm at the moment, then maybe we would have got things done a little bit quicker, but probably not as well. It's about building real relationships with the publishers as well. They, because I also work for a publisher, I get to see it from the other side. And I was sitting in a meeting, you know, saying yes and no to games as well. And I can see, basically we have a pile for randomers, people that have just given us their pitches, and then people that we know that, you know, that have delivered projects before, not necessarily to us, but they've shipped projects that have been successful. They don't even need to be like hugely successful for us to even look at them, but just the fact that, okay, the studio has gone out, they've published the game, they've marketed it, you know, okay, they've done all right, the reviews are pretty good, and look at the art style that they've gone for. That seems to be more of the pitches that we go like, yeah, this looks decent. Whereas the randos, they have a few more hoops to jump through, which is then proving that they're a capable and worthy studio for the money. Because even then, it's like, it's a long shot as well. You might be one of 20 pitches that week, and then of those 20 pitches, maybe less than a quarter get through to like the playable build stage, where we would like then have a play of the game, have a little look at maybe a follow-up, and then half of those get through to like maybe like the actual financial evaluation stage. So it's difficult. And we have gone down the route of basically making games for partners. So this is our latest project, obviously. The previous game, Doris and the Dragon, we knew that we weren't going to get publishing for it. So we felt like we could do whatever we wanted. And we wanted to have a project that we loved in a genre that wasn't that popular, because this was probably the only chance that we were going to get to make a point-and-click adventure of this style. And we used that as an opportunity to learn how to hire people. This is probably my third or fourth business now. So it's just like, I've learned a lot from obviously starting up and failing, that it's just built my resilience a lot more this time round, if that makes sense. The studio's been going for like, 6 years, similar to you, Adam, as well. So my focus isn't like, okay, yeah, we're going to get seed funding in like month 3, and then, yeah, we're going to be flying by year 1. That's not my philosophy at all. It's just a long, slow building real relationships with people, and basically bullying them into giving us money, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, actually, from other studios. Just the relentless push for an answer is really important. And, and that's the thing, I suppose, when you're pitching to publishers, they're going to be looking at not just the idea, but I suppose the actual stability of the organization, in that, if you're going to give X amount to a small studio to do something, they're going to want to see the fact that you're a solid company, with things in place to get stuff done.
Yeah. Sorry. You go.
That's all right. No, I was going to say, because I wanted to link into that and back up on one of Jay's points. There's a thing in, I want to say it's in marketing, which is about 7 times. If someone has met you 7 times, if you see something 7 times, it takes about 7 times for you to recognize that that's a thing that exists, that you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And certainly so our first sort of event pitching to publishers was, we've been a company for about a year. It was our first kind of major event. It's daunting to go into a room full of people. It's like, oh, that person's from Sega, and that person's from Curve, and that person's from Su, and all these kind of things. You're like, oh wow, these huge studios. But once you've gone to 1, 3, 5 pitching events, and you realize that there are similar people going to each of these, and every time you go, you might be pitching to 1 person or 2, and then you're seeing them again. They're like, oh, hey, you're still working on that game, and you're having those conversations. You actually do build these kind of relationships with people. And by the sort of the 6th, 7th, 8th time you're going, that sense of you are a part of this industry. These are, these people, they have a respect for the fact that you're going to these events, and you're part of the hustle, for want of a better word. That definitely builds into it. And so the conversations are less sort of you proving your existence, and you feel like it's less you proving your existence, and you being passionate about the thing that you're making, and them understanding that you're a studio. And that's not to say that you can't go on your first time and pitch it, and it's amazing and it all works. But the fact that you're there at all and talking to these people and stuff builds up your reputation in this industry, so that even now you can, when you've done it for several years, you can go back and chat to people. And when you see new studios coming in, you can understand where they're coming in from, why it might seem scary for them, but know that you have built up that over time, the ability to just be able to just sort of chat to these people, because at the end of the day, they're all just people. They're all just humans who are there. You know, they want to see cool and interesting games. You're there to show cool and interesting game, and you can just chat to them about, you know, games. It's a good icebreaker.
Yeah, no, it's a fun topic to talk about. That's the thing, and like it's, as Adam was saying, it's just become part of the furniture. I think it's like, if you see the same, there's a crowd that goes to these events. Essentially, it's just like the same crowd goes to the same events. So if you go to all of these things, you end up bumping into people, and the conversation becomes less like, oh, let me introduce myself. It's more like, I recognize you from that event. How are you doing? How are you getting on with your project? You know, that sort of thing. And also when it comes to like pitching, like I wouldn't be afraid of like re-pitching an idea again to someone that has rejected your idea, especially if you've significantly changed it and it's essentially a different pitch, because then it means that you are kind of responding to the market, responding to feedback that you've been getting. Like as we have been pitching, our pitch has improved like 100%. Like at the beginning, people were just going like, yes, cool idea, that's really good, but this and the other. And now these days it's just becoming more like, okay, let's have a follow-up next week, like those sorts of responses, which is obviously a lot better than the quite interesting but no thanks kind of thing. And especially the people that we have reapproached as well have been very encouraging, and they feel like they are sort of checking in as well, which is nice. Yeah, but what we're basically saying, I think me and Adam, is just like networking is like a big part of being an entrepreneur, of being a director as well, like a senior leadership team level. If you want to just keep your head down and do your work, then that's fine. But that's still not enough if you want to be a CEO or heading up a studio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. That completely makes sense. And, you know, I guess if you're not out there meeting people and getting rejections and hopefully feedback with those rejections, you'll never be able to make the links in your head to adapt the idea that you've got to then make it something that's commercially viable, you know. And I suppose, you know, that's a question there, you know, if, you know, you've got your indie studio, you've set it up, you're looking at developing that first pitch, that first commercial title. What elements maybe, I mean, it's a very difficult question really, because it could be a million things, but are there any kind of key elements when coming up with a commercial title that you should put into your pitch, or could be in your game? What is there anything in there that might be able to support that kind of idea creation process?
So if I can, I'll jump in quick on this one. This is the thing. So if you've come across Transfuser before, which is sort of the graduate program for UK Games Fund for doing this, so I've been a mentor on that a couple of times because I did it back in 2016. So I sort of learned how to do it badly, and then now go back and tell them what I did wrong. I'm like, please don't do what I did, because the absolute key thing for me is figure out the core, unique, interesting thing about your game which set apart, and focus on building a demo that demonstrates that and that alone. Because you could sit on your demo and make it over 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, just building up all the bits and pieces and stuff. But if your demo takes 2 years to build, by the time you're showing someone, you may have run out of money, you may not be in a position to do it, whatever it may be. There's a core thing at the heart of your game which you can show to someone, and if they can get it in that kind of period, then you know you've sort of captured their attention. A really good example for this is if you look at Superhot, the game, obviously now phenomenally successful. You know, the company now runs its own fund for indie studios, sold millions on Steam and on Quest and all this kind of thing. If you can go back in time, their first example was a game jam game that they made in 7 days, and that has the red characters, black and white, and it has the mechanic of time moving when you move. And if you played that, you got the game. You could play, it's a 5-minute demo. You play it, you go, oh, I understand. That's what it is. That if they can do it in 7 days, you can do it in a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever you need. But focus on the thing that's really important, because if you can get that across in your pitch, in your presentation, it's all about why our game is interesting and different to everything you've seen before. And if you can get that across, that's going to hook people in.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. It's just like the speed at which you can get to a prototype, because for us, we can't afford to bin projects, essentially. So what we do is we spend a lot of time on the market research and then think of every reason not to make a game, right? So we are brutal when it comes to like the deciding on what to do, essentially. It's just like we've got a big board with loads of ideas and we just slowly just get rid of them one by one, just be like, yeah, it's a cool idea, but it's going to be too expensive, you know, on the graphics side. Or this is cool, but it's a bit too technically challenging for us at the moment. We don't have enough programmers to be able to make this work. So it's just about, for us, it's about viability overall, and then also the speed at which we can get to a prototype that would actually get the ideas across. But the other thing that I'd add to that, Adam, probably would be like try to come up with a sort of a target render, I guess, as well. So if you are using a lot of like asset source stuff, and if you can't get, you know, the art looking as amazing as you want it to be in the prototype, you can gray box, but you should also work towards like maybe what the game could look like, you know, in the future. You might want to, just so that the publisher could then sort of extrapolate, you know, this is what the game might look like. And they're very visual people as well. And I would just say GIFs are your friend, you know. If there's with games, it's just like, it's the movement, it's the explosions, it's the things that they want to see. It's hard to get that across in like a static image. So getting lots of videos, lots of GIFs and stuff into your presentation really, really, really helps. Yeah.
Just to back up on that one as well, it's really easy to fall into the trap of thinking that you should show more and more things and show as much of the game as possible. And actually the reverse is probably more true. It's better to show something that is smaller, less of the game, that's more polished, closer to the final thing, more representative of the kind of quality you can produce, that shows off much, much less of the game, like a minute, 2 minutes, than it is to try and show a little bit of lots of mechanics. Because if you can show something that's going to demonstrate, you know, this team that I built is super capable, we're capable of producing this quality, but, you know, for the rest of it, we'll do it for the rest of the game. This is only 2 minutes. That's a much better demonstration than going, oh, we can make all these mechanics, but it doesn't look, it would look like you don't know how to make it sort of feel polished and game ready. So you're better off doing something small and polished than something large and not quite there yet.
So focus maybe displaying on that unique mechanic, I guess, that makes your game different, like in Superhot or other games. And actually, interestingly, I mean, there's a fantastic Twitter event that happens, I think, a couple of times a year called Pitch a Game, which you guys might have seen. That I think it really took off this year, and you know, there's so many games that were pitched there, and essentially people were pitching their games with like, you know, what were essentially kind of 15-second GIFs, and I know a few games from that directly that have then gone on to speak to publishers because they got across the unique mechanic in 15 seconds, and it was just so well done, and they chose exactly the right thing to show that it was all that was needed for them to then start that kind of conversation as it went forward. So it's definitely possible, I guess, if you've got a game that is unique, and I suppose that's one of the things that you should try and be, you know, as an indie developer, that's probably one of the only things in your kind of, you know, your that you've got in your back pocket to do, in that you're not tied to anything. You know, you don't have to do anything for anybody else. You can do it for, you know, for yourself. And, you know, certainly, you know, with you know, your game, Jay, you know, that game, obviously, I don't know, but it felt very kind of personal. So Doris and the Dragon was, you know, very, very, it was, you know, it's a lot of talking about resilience and loss and all kinds of stuff in there. And, you know, that game was made for you, do you think? And how do you balance heart with commercialization sometimes? Is that tricky?
I mean, heart is sort of where we want to make games with a lot of heart. That was the central philosophy of Arrogant Pixel. It's just like, we want not wholesome games, but honest games, things that people could resonate with. That's sort of our philosophy when we're choosing products. It's like, how many people is this product going to speak to? And we want it to be as universal as possible. And it was a personal story. We didn't really make it for a specific audience. This was very much like, we want to make a point and click adventure. It was actually Doris is actually Ben's grandmother, who actually passed away very sadly. And we just sort of imagined what she could be doing in the afterlife, essentially. And that's sort of the embryonic ideas that sort of developed into Doris and the Dragon, essentially. But balancing that, I don't actually find it that difficult, because that is what makes us unique, you know, maybe from companies that are very, very like commercially minded. Although I do feel like there is a balance that could be struck. I just know that that's our central philosophy, and that's what we put into all of our games. So none of our games are not going to be without heart. So for us, it's just sort of, well, we can't make a game if it doesn't have it. That's sort of where I'm coming from. But balancing commercial opportunities, we just do a lot of market research. If it's what we like to do is just going like, what is an underserved genre? And what's another underserved genre that we quite like? Let's just try and mash those together, or let's try to modernize a genre that's been sort of fallen by the wayside a little bit, maybe something that's a little bit unpopular, and then try to make it cooler and nicer, maybe more modern, maybe shinier. But yeah, it needs to have a twist. It needs to have something that the publishers can go, oh, it's this, but it does that instead. It makes it very easy for them to understand. Whereas if you're like way out there with like a super original idea that people maybe aren't quite ready for, that's also quite difficult to translate, I think, to publishers. It's timing at the end of the day. It's like, is the game going to be timely? And maybe Doris and the Dragon wasn't that, but when we first launched it on Newgrounds, it got such a huge response just because nobody makes point and click adventures for Newgrounds, and it was the only one there, so we got front paged. So it's just about finding those opportunities and just really like aiming for them.
Yeah. So I mean, it kind of brings me on to kind of marketing ideas, I guess. So you're an indie studio, you've got a very small budget, maybe a zero budget for marketing, let's say. In terms of both your studios, what was the idea that you did that just got the most hits or most downloads? What was the most successful marketing idea that you did that didn't cost that much?
So from our perspective, the thing that's actually done the best in terms of stuff that we've launched was we launched a 360 video with another company that was to do with flash flood preparedness, preparing for flooding. Very, very sort of commercial, But that went on to get almost 2 million views on YouTube with very little marketing. And the reason it did is because it was novel. It had the whole 360 video, just kind of interesting. Just that little bit of interest got enough people because like, oh, this is something new. Very similar to what Jay was just saying there about like the fact that nobody else was doing it is just enough that the people who care get passionate about it and go, let me share this around and tell other people. And that can create the kind of virality that shares stuff. If you look at if you look at places like Twitter and like Reddit and all those kind of places where things just have the capacity to explode, almost entirely the ones that do it on no budget and just kind of catch the moment are ones where they're just doing something a little bit interesting, and they normally stick a GIF in that goes, this is what do you think about this, and just ask the people, and they come across as sincere, honest people going, I've made this thing, I think it's kind of cool, what do you think? And people, if you get the right kind of people love it. Like the things that get shared around on, there's some of my favorite sort of marketing. There's a game called Cluster Truck that at the time was called Highway Fight Squad, which is by Landfall Games. Started with a GIF of a guy sort of bouncing in first person across multiple trucks. And that's all it started with. And from that, it spawned a subreddit of 10,000 people all going, oh, I want to see this game get made, and a studio that now makes totally accurate battle simulation, all that kind of thing, because they were just doing something a little bit interesting. So for me, it's about very similar to the lots of things we talked about here. It's about finding a way to communicate a simple idea that hooks people. They go, oh, that's interesting, and that can sort of carry you a long way.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that I think the timing is probably the most important thing. Is just like, and that's so difficult to predict as well. Like, are you too early? Are you too late? Like you just don't know. But for us, especially the Newgrounds uplift was just probably the biggest thing because it gave us legitimacy. Tom Fulp was just like, hey, I really like the game. And we were just like, oh my God, it was pretty mental. But we sort of released the free demo, and then people started picking it up and then making YouTube videos out of it. So there was this cool like sort of feedback loop. Essentially, it's just sort of like, okay, someone will play the game, make a YouTube playthrough, and then people watch that YouTube playthrough, come to Newgrounds to play the demo, and then we remastered it. We put fully voice acted point and click adventure up on Steam, and that did really well as a result. essentially. It was essentially the same game. We just did better music. We ported it all from was it Game Maker to Unity, because at the time it was a browser only game, and we were thinking, oh my god, we need to make this run on a PC of some kind. So we ported it all to Unity, but that was all a learning curve for us. We really did not know. We weren't really thinking too much about it, and now we are, and that's definitely affected our experience of going through releasing the first 2 games. Has definitely affected the kind of game that we're pitching at the moment, and also our strategy going forward. Yeah,
I suppose once again, like, you're talking about, you don't set the studio for one game. You're going to be constantly learning. Every game you put out is going to teach you something, and then you can just build and build and build and build and carry on. Hopefully going forward. I mean, a lot of people who are probably thinking about starting up their studio are going to be thinking about funding straight away. How can they support themselves for that, whatever it is, that first 2 months while they build that short prototype to then go and pitch. That might be the direction they decide to go in. I think you mentioned Transfuser, which is a fantastic program previously, that's run by the kind of UK Games Fund. That's potentially a route of funding that I think you guys might know about, that'd be good to talk about. But are there any other routes of funding as well, in addition to that you would say for an early stage studio to try and go for?
Yeah, so Transfuser is a great one for graduates. UK Games Fund obviously is they have 2 different rounds. One round is only for sort of established studios, but their other round, which I think round 8, which they haven't announced yet, but they've talked about, will be for any kind of studio to apply for with a game. So those are both good. Speaking to university enterprise groups, because they'll know of funds that are specific to sort of local regions, really useful to go and speak to your local enterprise group at the university. Also, the larger local enterprise partnership, or LEP, for each sort of region and city around the country, you're going to have one. They will know funding opportunities, things that are around, ways that you could apply funding, etc. Speaking to the larger sort of bodies, so Yuki will be aware of the kind of the funding opportunities around. There's also big government bodies that sort of put out funding rounds as well, like Digital Catapult, Creative Enterprise, Innovate UK, Immerse UK. Those kind of grant funds are particularly good because they are non-repayable. You don't have to pay anyone back. You'll get the money to build the thing you're working on. Also the creative clusters, so there's Story Futures, sort of London and Guildford, XR Stories up here in York and Yorkshire. All of those are great sort of places that really are interested in investing in the creativity in the local area. But there's always, for every sort of area in the UK, there are smaller local ones as well as sort of regional and national ones. And those are all fantastic. And as well as being fantastic places to sort of find funding, they're also great resources for sort of knowledge, expertise, mentorship, support, and just having a group of people that you can chat to about the problems you're going through and gain and have some understanding and sympathy really from people who have been through it before or know what that struggle is like.
Yeah, no, I basically, like, all of the people that you just mentioned, Adam, were literally in my mind right now. But I would also just say there's no shame in getting a part-time job and funding this. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's just like with grant funds, all of that stuff, you're not guaranteed to get it. And like, you should apply for absolutely everything that comes your way, but you shouldn't just cut your nose off to spite your face, really. It's just like, as long as you're making enough to survive, a month, you can get a small room wherever you happen to be living, and work on the game part-time. That's okay as well, as long as you're looking after yourself. Just don't completely kill yourself. That's all I'm trying to say. It's just like, there needs to be a good balance. Like, there's nothing wrong with having a part-time admin job or working in a supermarket. Absolutely not. Those sorts of jobs teach you so much about just being a productive person, in today's society. And I think that working in retail or anything like that will give you those skills. Just entering the workplace is going to help you. And then perhaps, especially if you're working in a smaller company or smaller cafe or something, try to get in on those management meetings as well. Try to speak to the owner and try to understand how they started up. Because a lot of my mentors were from my retail jobs. Basically, they were the startup owners of a small shop or something like that, and that's how I learned how to do some content management for websites, learn a little bit of coding, learn how to network, and how they got contracts in for their shops and things like that. These are all transferable skills. So let's say for whatever reason you just decide, indie games aren't for you and you want to work somewhere else. Those are skills you can take with you, any kind of business. Yeah. So they're useful for sure.
I think that's fantastic advice. And I think there's such pressure for somebody who's just finished a games degree to just suddenly go be working in the industry. And it might push them down that direction of setting up an indie studio when they're not ready. And that could be the wrong time for them. And you're right, there is no shame in doing other work. And no matter what that job is, you're always learning, and you can always come back to it at a later stage when you're ready. And I think right at the beginning, when we said you need a bit of an entrepreneurial attitude to do this, certainly you need some business skills. There's no harm in finding those business skills somewhere else for a little bit and then coming back to this. You've got plenty of time. Yeah. We're rounding out now, so I'm just going to ask you a quick question, two last questions. So, firstly, what one thing, if you could start it all over again, would you have done differently if you were starting your indie studio over again?
If I was starting my indie studio over again, I don't know if I would change anything. That's the thing. Otherwise, then my life would be completely different. Do you see what I mean? I kind of like to live my life with zero regrets, hopefully, just like everything happens for a reason. But just piggybacking off what you just said, in that I think starting up a company without having a plan is probably the most irresponsible thing that you can do, because especially if you're borrowing money and all of that stuff, because these are, especially your directors, whoever you've roped in to help you start this company, you're responsible for them as well, and you just need to have that kind of maturity about starting a company. But yeah, I don't think I'll change anything. What about you, Adam?
So the one thing that I would change if I go back and do it again is I would have had somebody who was dedicated to the business development side specifically, because it's something that I took on and that other people in my team also took on at different times. And splitting that role between making the thing and also trying to sell the company is hard. Business development is a full-time role. I would have had either had one of us from the start dedicated to it, or found somebody else who would be interested in working with us, because that's being able to go out and network and find opportunities and that kind of thing takes a huge amount of time. And so, yeah, if I could go back and do it again, that is the one thing I would add, is have somebody who's just dedicated to do that from the beginning.
Brilliant. And finally, so I think it was this week that Dean Carter, the co-creator of Fable and Dungeon Keeper, said that he thought games should be more weird, and that indie game spaces were where you need to look for real innovation in gameplay rather than the big AAA studios. Do you agree with that? And could you give me your favorite weird indie game that you think people could maybe learn something from in terms of their own game design potential they should definitely play?
100%. Weird games are the best kind of games. Like when you play them, you're like, oh, I don't know if there's just one. That's the thing. I think there are lots of games that take maybe a traditionalist idea and then do something weird with it. Like if you tried to pitch before it came out, Nidhogg was a game that I absolutely adored when it appeared, which is just it's jousting in kind of a hellscape with a giant sacrificing yourself to a giant dragon. Like you sit there and what? But that's what the game is, and it's fantastic for it. And skateboard, skateboarding bird, and all these kind of weird games that have come out, Push Me, Pull You, and all these kind of weird space games. Weird stuff is fantastic. And if you want novelty, weird is always novel. So if you can come up with something like that, this is the place to do it.
I love a good weird game as well. I think my taste in games is very, very unpopular. So probably mine is exclusively weird games. Like the one that I've loved playing recently is a game called The Procession to Cavalry. It's a hilarious it takes sort of Renaissance artwork and it's cut it out, and it's just a really comedic game. I like funny games. Like these games need to make me laugh, for me to really enjoy them. So I do like things that have a little bit of tongue-in-cheek humor. I think, this was self-published by Joe Richardson. So it's an excellent game that you need to check out. And a really unique one, it's probably quite weird actually, is Her Story. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but it's basically taking real footage, and it's kind of like a murder mystery at the same time. Again, by solo dev Sam Barlow. It's incredible, and I've been trying to persuade pretty much everybody that will listen to me to play this game, because it is genuinely something that I wish that I had come up with, because it's such a simple idea. One actress, excellent performance, and then just a really thought-provoking, very eerie game, essentially. And I thought that was excellent. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And if people in the stream would just like for fun to put their weirdest game in there, then I'm sure some people will really enjoy that.
Do it.
So that's fantastic. And once again, when you're coming up with ideas, it's rare that an idea is original. You need to go out there and play lots and lots of weird stuff, and then your deep brain will then make the connections, and then you'll come up with something new or interesting based on all that kind of thing. But I think you need to go and explore and find out stuff rather than just relying on the games that you played when you were growing up. But anyway, thank you so much for your time. That was brilliant. I really enjoyed that chat.